Hello and welcome to another Talking To episode. I'm your host Teddy, and today I'm being joined once again by
Hayden.
And today we're going to be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the tmnt by looking back at the issue number 1 of the tmnt from where it first came out. Now, Hayden, you've never read any of the comics, and this was your first time reading it, and also the first time going back to seeing where it all began. Was it like seeing the Turtles being created from this very comic book, and seeing how it's gone on to create the 2012 show, 2003, and all the other weird and wonderful stuff?
To be honest, I am very shocked. This is the first time I've actually ever seen the comics, and of course this is one of the originals. And of course, to see how the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has grown, and I mean massively grown from this one comic, is very surprising and it's very shocking. And to be honest, I'm very shocked about how it's changed, how the story, the narrative, and the development of the Turtles has changed drastically throughout the years. And of course, going back to the roots, it just puts into perspective how different it was back then compared to the comics and shows that we're used to now. It's very, very different, but it's very cool to see the roots.
Yeah, I'll just say, looking back from where it started, it's really fascinating to see what's stuck around and what's changed, and it's just so fascinating to see what has changed and all that kind of stuff. And I think the thing for me, looking back on this comic and also the other comics that came out in this series, is just how this series even began. Just because if this comic was to come out today, I feel like it wouldn't have the same success. But knowing that it came back out then and what it did with Tomania and everything like that, it's just so surprising and shocking. And even knowing that this is how it all began, it's just so many things which I feel I don't feel like we're really mentally prepared for this, because I mean, we've seen the cartoons and be like, oh yeah, this is good. But looking back at now, just oh, so this stuck around and all this is just so weird in quite a few different ways. And also with this one, I don't know how to really do the podcast either, because how do you really talk about a comic? But, yeah, I mean, so, I feel like before I should actually talk about the comic, I feel like I'll probably explain a few little history bits, because I feel like that could be a little bit more helpful. So with the version which we watched, it was not already the comic came out in black and white when it first came out in 1984, and the comic was first produced or made in 1983 by two people called Kevin Eastman and P. Laird. And this comic was supposed to be it was a self-published book, and had to get a loan from I think it was either P. Laird or Kevin Eastman's uncle to publish it, and they didn't really think too much of it. But surprisingly, it did get a big success, and kept reprinting it and doing other issues. And do get to see early on in the comics a lot of stuff which is stuck around, such as April, Baxter, Triceratons, Ultrons. Lots of stuff that was originally in there, come over to other versions of the Turtles, and I just find it so fascinating. And then also there's also a lot of stuff about the actual creators themselves with what they wanted to do with this comic, because this comic was supposed to be more or less a parody of the comics of that time. And I feel like you might be able to see some of that sort of stuff in there. So they were also parodying Daredevil, Batman with Darkness and stuff like that. Also the X-Men. I don't know if you noticed any of that kind of stuff in there.
To be honest, with this side of the comics and all that, and of course with this particular side, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I do understand where you're coming from. It's very dark, very morbid, and much more, I want to say, not brutal, but very more graphic. That's the word I'm looking for. Very graphic in how it displays itself. And of course, like you said, it's very difficult to explain how to break down a comic, but from its graphical design and from its art stance, I'd say it's really good for what it is. It's very graphic. It's a very graphic novel. It shows blood. It shows a bit of gore, and it's just really interesting to see how they managed to get that and to show the effects that we're not used to seeing. Like me and you, we're used to seeing graphics where it's in 3D animation compared to what this with the 2D art style and the art style of the graphics and how they managed to create fight scenes and blood and the fighting scenes compared to like the 3D fighting scenes that we used to and we enjoy watching. It's very much different, and to be honest, it's quite a nice contrast between the two, and it just shows how much progression it's come and gone through, and which I just find incredible.
Yeah, I'd just say that like, with the art style, I mean, it's done by, I believe it's done by Kevin Eastman, which I feel like his art style is good, but I feel like it's people do praise it up to be better than what it is because it's Kevin Eastman. But I do think his art style is really great, and I do think that this story, and I mean, I'd like the story for what it's trying to do, but I feel like they rushed a lot of things in this one, especially for being like the first issue. And it's a little bit understandable because they wasn't really planning it to be a series or anything. But I do think that had they known it'd be like a series, I do think a lot of things would have changed. But yeah, I mean, let's just talk about the actual comic itself. So for the first build, the issue, we do get to see the turtles, they're fighting some pearl dragons. What do you think about that scene there?
To be honest, it was a bit confusing at first because the turtles are like right in. We get introduced to the turtles right there and then, and of course it's very different. I had to take 2 looks at them because I didn't recognize them as turtles first, because it was just such a different contrast of turtles back then compared to the turtles that we're used to seeing nowadays. So it was a bit confusing at first, but of course when I saw the turtles and then of course the purple dragons, I was thinking, oh okay, so this is purple dragons versus the turtles. And to be honest, the art style of the purple dragons is very typical of like your bandit or gangster sort of thing, compared to the what we used to see in the purple dragons in the TV series where they wear black and purple. This is more like traditional style clothing that most people commonly wear, which is pretty cool and what I quite liked. And I really did enjoy the different art styles with the characters and their different voices as well, and how they are portrayed with their voices, which is quite cool, and I quite enjoyed that as well. But yeah, no, I really did enjoy this little fight scene. It was like a very first introduction of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're out on patrol, they come across the purple dragons, and they have a fight. Traditional Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style.
You had to say about this bit here, and I feel like, and did you like sort of like get the see how much this like influenced the 2003 show in terms of like majority of the stuff that happened in this issue? Because that's something which I wanted to ask you about, because I feel like with this bit here, you can definitely see a lot of influence in the 2003 show with the like first scene with Turtles finding the Pearl Dragons in that little alleyway. Did you see that, or any sort of like noticing it now?
To be honest, I did kind of see it like just slightly, because I was thinking, is like, oh, this is like reminding me of the 2003 and the 2012 shows where the Purple Dragons are in the alley, and it's like the very first like appearance of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So yeah, I do understand, and I do see where you're coming from with that. And yeah, I did see that, and I was thinking, is it? Because I didn't want to say it just in case I was wrong, but I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, well, the reason why, and there is a reason why that, because Peter Laird, who created this comic, or he sort of co-created this comic, was heavily involved in the 2003 show, and wanted to make the 2003 show more like these comics. So this is why I do see like a lot of influence, if not like scene adapted into a show. And I do feel like this is like probably one of the better ones, where I do feel like the 2003 show did like a really good job of like adapting the comics and like taking like what was good from the comics, but also changing up to be like good, fresh, modern for the comic for that TV show. And I do feel like yeah, definitely with the TV show they did definitely adapt this bit a lot more better, with like you said, with like the Pearl Dragons having more like unique styles, looks, difference, all that. But I do think that like here with like seeing how it was first done, I do find it to be I mean I don't know what to really say, just because it's one of those kind of things it's always been there, and I don't know how else you could really change it, because it's just a very iconic thing that if you did change it, how else would you change it? But I think that it does a really good job of setting things up that, like, these other turtles, they come across these people and they're ready to just kill people, which, like, looking back at other like, version turtles is vastly different, which is great, but at the same time, like, a little bit, ooh, okay. But, yeah, and I do feel like the colours definitely do help this to be a lot more, I mean, I don't know, because black and white definitely have a certain feel to them, but I do feel like the colours, which was one which we saw, definitely has a more detailed look to it, especially with all the blood and stuff like that, which really helps. But I do feel like this bit here was really great to see the turtles in action. Maybe not best to see like turtles actually have any sort of personality, which they don't really get, like don't actually have any sort of personality until the second issue, which a little bit crazy. But then after that, we do get to see a very long part of the issue about Splinter telling the story about how the turtles came to be with Tang Shen, Hamashi Yoshi dying, and turtles growing up and stuff like that. What do you think about that bit there?
To be honest, I was not expecting that. I wasn't expecting the story to be so vastly different to the story that I'm used to hearing. Especially how, Master Splinter wasn't originally a human, he was always a rat. But of course he was then mutated by the mutagen. So that was very, very much different. And of course, hearing about Shredder, Shredder's backstory as well. And of course, Shoji, oh gosh, I forgot the name. Shoji and Master Shoji and
Master Saki. Oh no, what? What are you talking about?
the two masters, Master Shoji and I'm guessing
Shredder. And
yeah.
Splinter. And Shoji. That sounds nothing like Shredder.
Well, in the comic it said Shoji, Shogi. That's what I thought it was. Or have I got that completely wrong? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you might be wrong.
Oh, well, my bad then. But the two masters...
Moving on.
Anyway, moving on from that. But yeah, no, with the two masters and of course fighting for Shen and being very graphic on how he wants to... being very graphic with Shen and of course Master Splinter's master killing the brother. It was just very graphic, very like dark, a very dark, twisted, kind of reminded me of a DC sort of novel, which is like very, very cool to see. Like it was very dark, like he killed someone, and of course then he was exiled, and then of course he took Shen with her to New York, and then of course the brother of the fallen took up his place and became a Foot Clan master, and it was just very different to see how the two stories, the very different stories that I've heard across doing this and watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's very different to what I'm used to, but it's very cool that it's very graphic, because we're not used to seeing many graphic outtakes and stories with this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because it's mostly designed for a younger audience. But this, I find it much more enjoyable because it's graphic. Because I'm a bit older, you see. Do you understand where I'm coming from with that?
Yeah, I do. It's just like the cartoons tone it down for the younger audience, while this has no restraints.
Yeah, definitely no restraints.
But yeah. Also, with the part with the like, and also, what do you think about the part with the like Turtles growing up and Splinter teaching them? What do you think about that bit there?
Oh, sorry, what was that?
I was talking about the part with the Turtles growing up and what do you think about that bit there?
With the Turtles growing up, that was pretty cool to see how they were trained and how they learnt from Splinter, from Master Splinter, of course, and of course how Splinter learned his moves from his previous master. To be honest, I thought it was quite short. But of course, this was the first issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ever, so I guess they didn't really have a direction on how they would train and progress the turtles as such, but I thought it was pretty cool. It's like learning from their master and to build them up to train and to avenge Master Splinter's master, which is pretty cool. But to be honest, it was pretty dark as well, knowing that Master Splinter was training the turtles to kill Master Shredder, who killed his master. And it was like very, very dark, and if you think about it, it's very graphic, and how it's like very dark, and how this bitter hatred has been passed on from Splinter to the Turtles, and then to the Turtles onto Master Shredder. It's very, very deep.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I do find it, because this bit is later expanded upon in the last story arc for this series, or I wouldn't say the series, but like this volume, where Turtles do reflect on it, saying basically like the violence which Master Splinter wants them to do with the Shredder has caused a lot more, which all led to like the city going to war with the Foot Clan, Turtles, police, the whole thing. But yeah, it's very fascinating with how it was always meant to be this way in this universe, and yet, and also I do like this contrast where like in the 2003 show, Splinter more or less has like the same sort of like ideas in a way, but he's but like, and in 2003 show, he says basically like he wants to train Turtles to like teach them how to defend themselves, but he never wanted them to go down like the same dark path and go out to seek revenge, which I do find to be like a very interesting contrast between like the comics and TV show. But I do find it to be like as you said, like very interesting with how it all leads to more violence, and it's just so fascinating. And then also one last thing which I do want to ask, with the bit where they were saying that the cancer fell out the truck, did that bit there was actually a reference to Daredevil with the cancer hitting the person in the person's eyes. That's supposed to be how Daredevil was created. So technically, Turtles and Daredevil in the same universe and all that.
Oh wow. Really?
Yeah.
I never thought of that before, because, yeah, like you said, Daredevil is blind, and, of course, something happened to him as a child, but I never thought of that, really, until you've said it just now. That is actually quite an interesting crossover. Is that an actual thing?
It's a theory that has a lot of weight to it, but they can't officially confirm it because of legal reasons, but it basically is. But not really, but it's just more of like a hint, like nudge nudge wink wink kind of thing.
Oh, gotcha. Because they wanted to, I guess the producers of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were fans of Daredevil, I guess.
But yeah, I mean, I think that with this origin, I do enjoy quite a lot of it, but I do feel like a lot of it was just put in there to just explain the whole setup for this issue, and I feel like had I done things differently, this whole backstory would have been placed differently, so there's a lot of stuff like that. But I think that overall, for what I was trying to tell, and I do feel like they did adapt this into 2003 show really well in like a future episode which I haven't seen yet. It's like a very fascinating tale, which I mean, it's all like one of those old tales, so it's all basically like two people fall in love with someone, fight with it. It's a very classic tale, but I think for like what the most interesting part was, it was like the outcome of what happened with the two brothers, which I won't say two brothers, but like, you know what I mean. I do feel like I find it interesting that they focus on that part instead of, like, because I know like in other like stories they would focus more on the two people competing, but instead they focus on that part, which I do find to be much more fascinating because well, did lead to tales, but I just find it a little more fascinating with how like people interacted and stuff like that. And then even with how Master Splinter, it's that's a really weird thing with how he was able to just be a rat that just, you know, just learn karate and ninjutsu just by watching his master in a dojo. That's all really weird, but it works for Turtle's sake, so yeah. And I do think that for like the majority of the origin, like, I know it's hard to explain just because it's one of those things like sort of like with the opening with this issue that is been around for so long that I don't know what they could really do to make things differently. and other versions have more or less like dated parts of this, and I feel like that's the reason why he couldn't really change it all too much. But later versions have changed it, which I made a bit more interesting and fascinating. But knowing that like this is where it all came, it's just I don't know, it's one of those kind of things where it's perfect, but you can't. But like, you wanted to change it, there's no real way of really changing it without changing everything. Really, I just find it like so fascinating with that bit. So yeah, so then after that, we do get to see Raphael. He goes out to go and fight some foot ninjas and deliver a message to a Shredder. What do you think about that bit there?
To be honest, I thought that was pretty cool. Seeing Raphael in this sort of state, and just to see him different from the rest of the Turtles. To be honest, it was quite weird because majority of this comic was kind of basically focused on Raphael. Which is interesting because Raphael was this own independent character compared to Leo, Donnie, and Mikey. So it was quite focused on Raphael, in my opinion at least. But to be honest, I thought it was pretty cool how he was stalking the compound of the Purple Dragons or the Foot or whoever they were. And then, of course, him attacking and sending them a message. And seeing, of course, Master Shredder as like this business person. It was very weird, but very cool.
I mean, I have to say though, this bit here is quite like weird to see that this is the only part which they actually give like time to actually really develop any of the turtles. Like all the other turtles is just like either there, like Mike and Donnie are just there. Leo sort of has the same sort of personality as Raph, but is like less developed. It's surprising that this is the only part that like really develops like any of the characters, and like knowing for like where they all come like knowing for like this is where they all come from, and know where they are now with all like very defined personalities, looks and stuff like that. It's just so weird that this is the only part which they gave to developing any of the characters, which it's a bit weird. But then when like it seems rough fighting the Foot Ninjas, I do feel like this is also like a really great bit to like also really develop his character, also like showing like how like skilled he is compared to like the other Turtles, which they also showed their skills in like scenes, but they was only with the other Turtles, so they weren't able to like really show off their good skills. But here like goes to show like how good of a fighter Raph is, and even like also how good of a shot that was. But I mean also with the whole Shredder stuff, it does seem I don't know what to really say about Shredder. He's just kind of there, but I'm very surprised with the artwork. They didn't bother to change his look. He looks the same as he did when he killed Shen, and then it's like 15 years between, so...
It's still got like the baby face, you know?
Yeah, he hasn't really changed. But yeah, so after that we do get to see the show comes down to the rooftops, and the Turtles there, and they fight the Foot Clan. What do you think about the like first battle between the Turtles and the Foot?
Seeing the first fight, the first ever fight with the Foot and Shredder and the Turtles was very different to how I would imagined it. Because usually we get the typical fight in which we see the Shredder and the Turtles, they're fighting, but this is very different. It was a much more talkative sense in the fact that they were like seeing who they really are for the first time. But to be honest, I thought it was still pretty cool though, to see how the Turtles and the Foot were fighting against one another. And to be honest, it really did remind me of the old Batman show. I'm not too sure if you've seen it or not, but the old Batman TV show back in like the 80s and 90s, where they would have the fight scenes where the screen would light up and say pow, kapow, and fight. That's what it reminded me of so much.
Really?
And I was because it was very much it reminded me so much of that as a kid, because I liked to watch Batman growing up, and I used to like watch the really old cartoony one where they would fight and it would go kapow, punch and kick, and it would all light up the screen. That's what it reminded me of with that fight scene and how it was laid out in such a manner.
That's probably one of the weirdest comparisons to make with like a very dark version of Turtles and the most goofiest version of Batman.
Yeah, I know. It's only me that would do that, but that's what I thought. It just reminded me of that style and sense of it. Even though it's two vastly different, like, topics and medias, that's what somehow my brain clicked to in that sense.
Yep, only you. I mean, with this fight scene, I feel like one of the limitations was that it's just images compared to just like animation where it's able to show off the fight scene. So I do feel like there's a little disadvantage there where it's just, you know, the fight scenes are very limited in comics, which I do feel like it's downside because it's comics, but you can't really do anything about it. But I feel like with this fight scene and the scene, like how brutal the Turtles work, like the scene like Donatello just smashes both stuff into someone's face and all blood comes out. It's like, because it's really great to see the Turtles be more mature and dark compared to like some of the stuff we're getting now. But at the same time, it's so weird to see him like be this dark, but it's so great. And then, because I love the big splash page. It was a big page where we get to see all four Turtles on the page and the final Foot Clan on the rooftops. I love that page so much. One of the best pages they've ever created. It's just one of those things. It's almost like it's almost like one of those kind of pages which you see in like Where's Wally, and just like looking around and be like, oh, there's that, wow. It's just like one of those kind of pages you can just look at forever and be like, oh wow, and it looks so beautiful. And I do also feel like that's maybe contributed to the fact that it does have colours. The black and white version isn't as good, but you know, back then it was good enough. But like seeing it now with all the colours, it looks so great and amazing, and it looks beautiful. And just about it, it's just so surprising that like this is where it came from with how dark it was, and seeing where like goes, because after this they went into the cartoon where it was robots and it was dark-ish, but if you consider robot violence dark, then yeah. And then goes on to all the other versions, which it never lives up to that like same sort of violence which we do get to see here, which is a little disappointing. But like seeing that this is the first fight, and also I do like the contrast with all the other fight scenes with Turtles. I feel like there's a few exceptions in other Turtle media where we do get to see the Turtles fight Foot Clan. Normally other Turtles are losing or something like that, and then normally normally in the second fight they the fight Foot and be like, oh yeah, beat them easily. I do like here, which is more like an even match, but Turtles do have an advantage, which I do like that kind of aspect to it, which is just, and also not to mention that they're straight up killers. That's something which I had no words for, but yeah. But what do you think about the battle between Shredder and the Turtles for the very first time?
I thought that was pretty cool. Seeing the Turtles and Shredder fight for the first time was very, very cool indeed. Like you said, going back to that specific slide that you could just look at, that's that really. I enjoyed how the Turtles fought against the Shredder and how they left their mark on Shredder as well, and just to see how Shredder was so like badly beaten and badly wounded. Like the chest plate was torn off, his skin was showing, there was slashes all down his back and his chest where the blades had been cut through his skin. Very graphic in that regards. But no, I really did enjoy in how he was destroyed or beaten by the Turtles, and the complete utter plot twist at the end. He pulls out a thermite grenade and blows himself to smithereens just to try and kill the Turtles. That is just completely unheard of for me with Shredder. Like, sure, Shredder would always do something to get back, but pulls out a thermite grenade? Like, come on, that is just crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here which I would say that this is probably one of the weakest fights. I would say not only in this comic, but also just Turtles overall, with like seeing Turtles versus Shredder, because most of the time it's like a really awesome and epic battle. Good to see how dark and menacing Shredder is in each version. But in this one, I don't know, I felt like it's a little bit like, because we do get to see Turtles go one-on-one, and I do feel like it's also problem is that it's just images, but we just get to see them like go up and then just throws them away or something along those kind of lines. When Turtles realise, oh yeah, we've got to work together, they just throw stuff at him and he just dodges it all. It just feels a little bit just like anticlimactic, because I mean, just got to see Turtles just brutally kill a bunch, like 30 plus people, and then they go up to this one guy and be like, "Oh no, we can't defeat him." You know, throw some shurikens. Yay, we defeated him, all that. I do feel like there's a little bit of like anticlimactic part to it all, but I do feel like at the same time, because it is comics, then there may also be effects in some of it, because I'm expecting like a big epic battle, and just you get to see him just throw people around, just dodge some shurikens. So there's a little part of that which I do dislike, but. Yeah, talking about the show with the grenade, I do like how he just escalates things like very drastically, just from going like, the whole Super Cuckoo thing. I feel like that's also another thing which like people don't really talk about. Like Leonardo just like going up to him and going like, "Yeah, kill yourself." I'm very surprised people don't make a big thing about it, because that's a very dark moment for a turtle just to like say to someone like, "Kill yourself" in front of us. That's very dark, and I have no words for it, and I'm a little bit glad which they've never brought this back into other versions of Turtles, because it is disturbingly dark, even for Turtles. Yeah, and then the whole grenade thing, it's just, again, another disappointing ending, but I just like how drastic he takes things. But yeah, what do you think about the seppuku scene? Did you think that it was very dark, or is it only something which you're realising now and like, oh shit?
Yeah, no, when Shredder pulled out the thermite grenade, it's like, "I'm gonna take you down with me," I was like, oh, this dialed up to 11, you know, this shit went real quick, you know, but yeah, it was very, very drastic turn of events that led to this. Like, he was fighting, and then he said, "You know what, screw this, I'm gonna just pull my last Uno card, really, and just, like, detonate a thermite grenade to kill everything, and including me." Like, it was very drastic. It was just very different, and when I saw it, and when I heard Shredder saying, "Look, I'm gonna pull out this thermite grenade and no one's gonna live," like, Shredder had literally no fear. Like, he was ready to die to honor his brother's death. And I don't think you could get away with that, sadly, in today's world with everything going on. But I really did enjoy that. Like, it was a very graphic novel, and it was very dark, and it reminded me of a lot of the DC work, like Batman, and how it was very dark and morbid. And it just shows how different and how much of a turn it's taken to with the new series and the new comics and all of that. They've taken a more lighter tone to everything that I know of so far, but seeing that for the first time, and seeing how Shredder was, and how committed and determined he was to actually, like, commit seppuku, in a way, like suicide, was just absolutely crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just so surprised they put something like this in there, and no one talks about it whatsoever, despite being probably one of the darkest moments in the comics. It's surprising how this franchise has managed to go from this very dark moment to being one of the most beloved kids franchises in the world. It's something which I feel like people need to study, because it's a miracle something like this even took off, but I'm glad it did, but just, damn.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to think that if this didn't take off, then we wouldn't be talking about it right now. It's crazy to think that, but...
Yeah. Then for the ending, we do get to see the Turtles go down, pick up the piece of armor, Shredder's been shredded, and they then go off, and that's pretty much it for this issue. What do you think about the ending for it?
To be honest, when it was the ending, I didn't really know what to say, really. Like, it was just very cut short. There wasn't, like, any signs of, like, Shredder coming back for a second time. It was just, like, very cut to the chase, and very, like, that's it. There's nothing more. There's nothing left after that. It just happens. I'm guessing, as this was the first comic, or the first issue, let us say, of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm guessing the producers didn't really have a direction nor a incentive to continue it on. They've just thought, oh, we'll just make this for the hell of it and see what happens. I don't think they understood how popular it was going to be until they actually released it. So I think that's why they cut it off very short at the ending, which sadly is disappointing. But of course, I got to give them credit, as this was the first ever issue that they made. So there's good and bad with it all.
You have to say that the ending does feel very short and very rushed, but yeah, I do feel like it was just because of that reason that it sort of didn't. I feel like with this kind of story, it's just how do you actually end it? So I feel like the way that I did end it was good enough, but it's one of those weird places of how do you properly end it. But I do feel like they did a really good way of ending it. But going back to your point about Shredder and all that. So this comic was just supposed to be a one and done kind of thing before it was brought on to be a monthly ongoing series. But Shredder was always supposed to be killed off in the first issue because they also didn't think it was going to be going on for forever or anything like that. Basically, it was just going to be a one and done. So that's pretty much the reason why it was left like that. However, you'll be surprised to know that Shredder does actually return in issue 10. And the reason for that is because the Foot Clan took his body, somehow it's still alive, used magic worms, and then the worms created Shredder's new body, and that's how Shredder came back to life, before he then got decapitated in the Return to New York story arc. The first handful of issues were all over the place. It's crazy to think that it actually managed to work. Just because after this issue, I'll go over the next 9 issues very briefly, and I feel like you very very quickly understand a lot of the influence on the 2003 show, but also how crazy it was and how this even is. It's a miracle this even worked as a franchise, because in issue 2 they met April and Baxter, and the Turtles' home was destroyed by the Mousers. So issue 3 they was on the run by the police because there was in April's van which was mistaken for a criminal's car. In issue 4 the Turtles found out about Tesseract and got teleported to a different alien world. Issue 5 and 6 they was on different aliens, and then issue 7 they came back to Earth. And it's in Tesseract. Tesseract got blown up, I think it did. Issue 8, they did a time travel story. Issue 9, they did the stories about when Turtles were toddlers, going after some assassins, after some Japanese people. Issue 10, it was a story following up on a Leonardo story. It was a Shredder Strikes Back story arc, doing that. It's crazy to think that those 10 issues managed to go on to expand and do something else, because that right there is not really what should happen in 10 issues. It's stupid and crazy, and things go from 1 to 100 extremely fast, and it really does show that they didn't have much of a plan. It was just trying to get to do things which they wanted to do just in case they couldn't do it, and it clearly does show in the early issues. And it's just so fascinating to see that it actually managed to go on to do something a little bit more. It's stupid, really.
It is crazy. It sounds very crazy when you put it like that. It just shows how popular it was and how many people wanted to see this sort of thing. It's just really crazy, and how you put it into words, it just shows how crazy it was, how crazy this storyline was. But people enjoyed it, and this is where the success came in, because it was something new, something different, and that's why I think people enjoyed this the way they do now.
Yeah, I don't have to say that. Also, with I don't know something about, because I feel like you definitely, I definitely noticed this a lot with you, when talking about Turtles. Turtles really brings out a lot of creativity in people, in ways which I don't think people actually realise it until they actually start talking about it. Because I know, with you, because I know you have a lot of weird and crazy and wonderful ideas all the time. But then hearing you talking about the Turtles, you're going into all these different fan theories and going into different storylines which you like to see. it brings out like a different side of you in a way. But I know it's like I feel like with Turtles, it's just a really creative idea and brand that really brings out the fun and creative side of people, which I don't think people realise, and it's just so fascinating to see that like this is where it started with a very dark and mature comic to then being like one of the biggest kids franchises in the world with so many different iterations which are completely different from one another, and with the amount of fans that it's created over the years, it's just like a once in a lifetime kind of thing, and I really don't think we can begin anything like this anytime soon. I think like the closest thing we got to anything like as big as this was I feel like the best example was Fortnite in terms of like original content stuff like that, because I know like Marvel's had a big rise over the past few years, but they've had a lot of time to really develop a fan base. But Turtles in like 40 years like become one of the biggest franchises, had I want to say like 3 Turtle Manias and still going strong. It's just crazy. It's I still can't believe it's 40 years and how much has changed. It's yeah, wow.
Certainly is crazy how far it's come.
Yeah. I mean, I know that like you're a relatively new fan and you haven't had a chance to really like explore all the other versions of Souls yet, but out of the past, I want to say 2-3 years you've been part of the fandom, what was your favourite memory or episode or anything like that that sort of like stuck with you the most in terms of like Turtle content, if that makes sense?
To be honest, what stuck with me the most, it's really hard to tell really, because there's so many different avenues, so many different series that we've watched and explored. It's really hard to pinpoint a specific one. But if I had to, and if I really did have to choose, I would probably have to go with the 2003 series that I've watched thus far. Sure, the 2012 was good, and of course that's where everything started off with this podcast, and started off with you, and getting into the series of the Turtles. But the 2003, which really stuck with me the most, was that sort of art style and that sort of storyline, and it just stepped with me the most. That's what the most... that's one of my personal favourites that I've watched thus far with this podcast, with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, yeah, 2003 is so far. But who's to say that something might come up and change my mind? It's always ever changing.
Yeah, I have to say that with like the past 40 years, and I've seen a good chunk of it and read a majority of it, I feel like the two versions that's really stuck out for me is definitely the 2003 show, just how much they adapted the comics. But also, that was the first one for me, childhood nostalgia. But also, like the IDW comics, I feel like that's one which I feel like it's going to stick out a lot amongst all the other versions, just because how much they was able to incorporate so much of every other version into one and create a really fun and fascinating tale to really like change everything up into a new way of how we think about Turtles with the origin and stuff like that. And I do think that the one thing which I think we can like definitely agree on is just like how much Turtles is like really brings out the creative side of people, and it's just so fascinating. And I feel like another reason why this like Turtles stuck out is definitely become so popular was just how much people really see like themselves in Turtles, either as like Turtles like personalities, because I feel like we all can say that we do like fit into one Turtles, if not all of them. And also I do feel like there's also another part of the Turtles like franchise which I do feel like people do like touch on to like for different reasons, just because like for me a lot of I want to say because like seeing Turtles being outsided, like no contact with the people, or feeling left alone. I feel like a lot of people are going to like attach to that as well. Something like that. I do feel like there's something about the franchise which people do see for like personal reasons, be like, yeah, this is Turtles and this is for me and stuff like that. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about this issue, or?
To be honest, with this issue, it was quite fascinating for me. It was quite cool to see the roots of how the Turtles were made and to see how far it has come from its roots. From a simple comic with only a few slides to seeing full-blown series, movies, productions, live-action movies of Turtles. It just shows how crazy it's developed over these last 40 years, and it's just nice to go back to the roots of things to see how far it's come as a show and as a small little part-time project for the fun of it, you know? These developers, these producers, didn't have much money to go off them, and they loved comics, and they took a passion, they took an idea, and they made it into something real. And it just shows how anyone with a creative mindset and someone who's willing to try things can create something amazing and create something powerful for others to collaborate with, to join with, and to develop this great community that is now the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and how it is today. It just shows how crazy it's all come from, and it's just crazy to think that with this, without these producers making this series, you wouldn't have found a passion of yourself, and of course I wouldn't be talking to you right now on this podcast, and we wouldn't be doing all these things. But it just shows how crazy it is and how much it's gone through. And so I think this is just a really nice reminder of the roots, and to see how far it's all come, and to see how everything else has come so far, which I just really, really do enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to wrap things up. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say just Kevin Eastman and Peter led. If by some chance you're watching this, and I highly doubt it, you are, just thank you so much for creating something which everyone can enjoy and love. And well, here's to the next 60 years, I guess. So yeah, happy 40th anniversary.
40 years.